Hey guys, STLYoungblood with you, and today what we're going to talk about is going to be the Redeemer, and it's going to be another episode of our Should You Buy series. Now, before we even get started, first thing I wanted to do was give a huge thank you to all of you guys. Primary reason for that, outside of just being awesome and as usual, my channel just crossed over the 1 million view mark. I think it happened about a week or two ago. So that's a huge accomplishment for me, and I couldn't have done it without you guys tuning in. So big thank you. I'm very happy about it, and closing in on 10,000 subs too. So got that out of the way. Let's go ahead and jump into the content. The Redeemer. This is the next great starship. It's the winner, and it's the one that actually was developed and released, and it's now in store for everybody to buy. Now, there's two ways to purchase this right now. One is to buy it as a game package, and it comes in at $265, or you could buy the standalone ship for $250. The extra $15, I presume, is your game package. Now, with that, it is going to be available with LTI until the 10th, but it is going to be a regular edition in the store, meaning you can buy it at any point from here on out. But if you want that lifetime insurance, get it sooner rather than later. So let's talk about the ship. And overall, the ship is 37 meters long, about 20 meters wide, and about 11 meters tall. It's got a mass of 42,000 kilograms. It has a 5-man crew and can carry 6 Marines. Now, if you remember this, this is the ship that's actually been labeled as the drop ship. And I think that's what we all expected it to be, but it's kind of evolved into more of a gunship type role. It can carry some cargo, 32 freight units, which is very, very minimal, and has some pretty good armament on it. It's going to have two size 2 class 3s. Those are going to be missiles on the both wing bases. You're going to be able to carry 10 missiles total. For class 4, it's got a size 3. It's actually 2 broadswords on the nose. And then as far as class 5 is, that's going to be your turrets. You've got 2 turrets, both with 2 Badgers on them. Shielding, size 6. Power plant, it's got size 5 equipped, but can be upgraded to size 6. And then thrusters, it's going to have 12 size 2 thrusters with 2 primary thrusters at TR5s. Now, these engines are really interesting, and they're very different from anything that we've actually seen. They're called vector lock nacelles, and people have said they kind of look like a hair straightener, which I can see now that people said them. Other people also said they look like nutcrackers. Either way, it's a new engine type that we've never really seen before. It's unique, and I think that this design is going to allow for greater maneuverability than just having similar thrusters sticking off the back of your ship. I kind of equate it to being like the Cutlass design, and how the Cutlass engines are actually going to allow it some more maneuverability. Now, I'm not expecting this to be on par with the Cutlass in any means, but it should be better than I think you would expect on a ship like this. It's also got a boarding hatch equipped, but we haven't gotten word yet on if it's going to have a like a docking collar similar to what the Cutlass has. I would imagine if it doesn't come with one, you should probably at least be able to equip one. Considering most of the time you're putting Marines into a ship, they're probably not going to want you to actually be on that ship. So I think you're going to need something there, maybe like a cutter as well, but we'll just have to play that by ear. Now, the brochure sells this as a very versatile option, if you actually read through it. But frankly, I don't see it being versatile at all. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad ship. I'm just saying I don't think it fits that bill of being versatile. I think it's very combat-focused. And speaking of that focused, I mentioned earlier that as we were going through the next great starship, I was under the impression that this was going to be more of a drop ship or kind of like a troop transport. And while it does that, it's now being labeled and being sold as a gunship. Now, that's probably for the best, especially when you consider the you're probably going to get more usage out of a gunship than you would a dropship, but an interesting kind of change in dynamic, at least from my personal opinion. Now, when I look at this, I see one kind of unconventional benefit right off the bat. And, you know, when I say unconventional, I'm talking about outside of the gunship or dropship capabilities. No one is going to want to board a ship knowing that you could have 6 Marines in there. So I kind of think of a scenario where someone maybe wants a briefcase, maybe filled with data, maybe filled with diamonds, who knows, whatever. Someone wants that briefcase securely transported from point A to point B. What better to do that than a gunboat with its own heavily armored crew holding things down on the inside? I think that's kind of a situation that most people aren't thinking of, but it could be a good option. Now, is that more expensive than grabbing like a M50 and hauling ass from point A to point B? Yeah, probably, but it's probably more secure too. So, I mean, we'll have to obviously see how that all plays out. And the reason I used a briefcase was because it doesn't carry that much cargo. But, you know, maybe it's a VIP. You know, maybe one person wants to make sure they're safe. Well, then you've got 6 armed guards protecting that person. So I think there are some things that we could maybe use this ship for. But overall versatility, I think, is going to be on the low end of the spectrum. Now, price is really the thing that's causing such an uproar from people about this ship. And I don't know how many of you go onto the forums or onto Reddit, but it has been a shitstorm about the pricing on this. I personally think that they were trying to find a place to fit it based on its attributes and like what it brings to the party. And then they also have to compare that to other ships. You know, if you compare the Redeemer to something like the Super Hornet, which I believe was sold at $180 initially, the Super Hornet is smaller. It has a size 4 max shield and power plant compared to like the size 6 that the Redeemer can get. It's also got less mass, but it also has far smaller engines and fewer thrusters. Now, if you compare the armament of those two ships, the Super Hornet has 6 guns plus size 1 missiles, whereas the Redeemer has 6 guns, 4 of them on turrets, and bigger missiles. So, does that right there justify it being $70 more? Probably, at least in my mind. You know, I think it has to at least be a little bit more expensive. Now, not to mention that while the Redeemer isn't the most versatile ship of all, I think it serves significantly more roles than something like the Super Hornet does. The range is probably quite a bit better too. We've also seen a lot of people comparing the Redeemer to the Constellation, and probably because it's in a similar price range, and likely also because they both have 2 turrets. Both of them have the same power plant and shield max size, but the Redeemer's quite a bit smaller. You know, smaller weapons with a size 5 or 6 power plant probably also means that the thing can be firing almost constantly without taking too much of a hit on the shields or on the maneuverability. You know, I actually envision a battle between the two to be pretty epic, and I think a Connie on its own would probably be fairly even fight with the Redeemer. I do think, though, that the Redeemer loses based on the P-52 that can be deployed from the back of the Connie, and that's based purely on you know, bringing the extra guns from the fighter to the battle, and then also just it's another target that you have to keep track of. Now, please, don't take that as me saying that the Redeemer should be buffed or the price dropped, because I actually feel like one of very few people who feel that the price is fine and the stats are fine. Now, does it matter that you can get a Connie Andromeda for the less of a price than the Redeemer? To some, it might. But I think with, you know, one having more specialized or more of a specialization in certain roles and being military spec, it doesn't really rub me the wrong way. Now, a lot of people feel it should have been priced at $200, which is less than the Andromeda. But I think to a certain extent, CIG was kind of locked in based on the other ships and their prices that have already been set. So maybe, you know, if you want to compromise, maybe meet at $225, kind of split it right down the middle and call it a day. But really, I think it's kind of fine where it's currently at. So let's get into the should you buy, which I think is why most people watch this. And this is one that I debated for quite a bit, which is part of the reason why it's taken me so long to get this video out. My initial reaction was to give it a pass. I wasn't interested. I didn't want to spend the money. I thought it was too specialized for its own good. And I only kind of like the looks of it. You know, as I've said before, if you don't like the looks, don't buy it, because you're going to have to see this damn thing quite a bit. After some deliberation, though, and reading other posts and just kind of looking at it, I actually started leaning a little bit towards the yes side. Maybe I should buy this. I think for those that are going to be combat-oriented, a ship like this brings a lot to the party. You know, the shields and the power plant are a really large plus. You know, they're big for the size of the ship. And I think it means it's going to be a very durable ship and could probably have almost continuous firepower without sacrificing too many other systems. The nacelles and more thrusters, both are bigger and more than I expected them to be, and I think it's going to be fairly nimble. I actually started looking at this as more of a heavy fighter, and that sort of started to pique my interest. I was like, oh, well, that could be kind of a cool dynamic for it. You know, I could envision this being a real menace, especially in part of a fleet. You know, the turrets are giving other people something to do. And in a big fight, you know, they can kind of help spread damage all over the 360-degree battlefield that we're in. Those size 2 missiles should deal out quite a bit of damage as well. And they could probably make life easier when attacking larger targets. Now, is it going to do what a Retaliator's torpedoes can do? No. but it's sure going to be better than a size 1 on most of the fighters. My eventual decision was to not buy this, and I'll tell you though, I will be getting one for sure in the game with in-game currency. The reason that I gave for that decision was that I'm definitely going to be buying the Bulldog when it comes out, and I expect it to be a bit pricier than we've seen some of the other fighters to be. So with that in mind, I had a hard time personally justifying the purchase. And if you haven't picked up on the trend yet, that's kind of the core behind this series. Can you justify the purchase, and will you enjoy your purchase? If yes, then go for it. You know, for those of you that are still on the fence, you know, try to think about how you're going to play in the persistent universe. If your focus is on anything but combat, I'd leave this one be and not pick it up. If your focus is on combat, though, then there's a couple questions to answer. You know, one, are you going to have people to man your turrets? If yes, then that's probably a point towards buying it. Yeah, I mean, you could always hire an NPC, but until we see them, I'm not trusting any of them in my ship. Two, do you or your organization have a heavy fighter or a gunboat already? You know, would you rather bring more firepower than speed or maneuverability? If yes, then this might be a good option for you than some of the smaller fighters. And three, are you okay with the price? Now that seems to be the sticking point for most people so far, and the outcries on the forums seem to reflect that people think that they're not getting enough bang for their buck. I disagree with that sentiment, but I can't and certainly won't tell you how to feel. But if you're not comfortable with the cost, then please don't buy it. You know, not only because I don't want to suggest anybody go into debt for a virtual spaceship, but also because people that complain about the price and still buy it should have known what they were getting into when they bought it and made the right decision from the beginning. The good news, though, is this is a permanent addition to the store, meaning that you're not in a huge rush. Yes, you could buy it by the 10th and get LTI, and while that's a nice perk, it's probably not a tremendous advantage based on the way they've talked about how cheap insurance is going to be in-game. So hopefully all that helps you in your decision making. If you have questions, put them in the comments. Otherwise, I thank you guys for watching. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and take care.